From Bloomberg's World Headquarters in New York City, I'm Matt Miller.
And from our studios in Washington, D.C., I'm Kailey Leinz. Welcome to Bloomberg Crypto, a look at the people, transactions, and technology shaping the world of decentralized finance.
Coming up, a Bitcoin ETF fake out. A false report stating that BlackRock had won approval sent Bitcoin briefly above $30,000, only for the firm to deny the story.
More on that. Plus, we give you the latest on the trial of Sam Bankman-Fried, as FTX's former director of engineering says he was intimidated by SBF and at times humiliated by him.
And as President Biden heads to the Middle East, we'll talk to a former CIA analyst about the role crypto plays with Hamas and illicit financing.
All of that is ahead. But first, let's get a snapshot of the market. The best way to do that on your Bloomberg terminal, CRYP Go. And what you will find is Bitcoin right now is trading around $28,600. After yesterday, a lot of volatility. As Matt mentioned, we saw a trip up to $30,000, up almost 10% at one point yesterday on the what we thought was news, perhaps, that BlackRock's spot ETF was approved, only for that to be shot down and Bitcoin prices to come back down with it. So right now we're at the $28,605 level. Interestingly, Bitcoin, one of the few digital assets that is actually higher on the day. Others like Ether are down slightly. It's down by about 0.7%. And then, of course, we have to talk about GBTC, Matt, the Grayscale Bitcoin Investment Trust. This has been in the news in recent days after the SEC on Friday decided not to appeal the ruling that found it was arbitrary and capricious in denying Grayscale's attempts to convert GBTC into an ETF. So it is up by about 3% on the day after a big move higher yesterday as well, Matt.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is on the hopes that it will be converted at some point soon. For a long time, there wasn't any such hope, and as a result, GBTC has traded at a huge discount to its net asset value. You can see here in this chart that goes back to 2002 that at some points we were looking at almost a 50% discount to net asset value. As the tide has turned in terms of the power of the SEC over this industry, because, you know, they continue to lose cases in front of judges, you can see that that discount has decreased to less than 15%. So it looks like more and more investors believe that GBTC is going to be able to convert to an ETF sometime soon. And while we're on the subject of ETFs, let me bring in Bloomberg ETF IQ host Eric Balchunas. He's been following this very closely with all of us and was part of the pushback on the false report about BlackRock yesterday, and of course also working with Bloomberg Intelligence and looking at ETFs for us as a company. Eric, what do you think about the likelihood that GBTC is able to convert to an ETF at some point, say in the next 12 to 18 months?
Pretty good. 12 to 18 months. I'd say pretty good. The real question is, will they be able to convert at the same time as the rest of the people in line, the rest of the issuers? That's an open question. Remember, a private trust has never been converted into an ETF. And you could argue the SEC may have a little grudge against them. And it's possible they hold them up in some kind of legal or technical way, approve the other ones, and then make them refile and approve them months after, or let them convert months after. We don't know. It's an open question, but they certainly deserve a lot of credit for suing the SEC and winning. And it's that lawsuit that has really paved the way for approval, since the SEC can no longer use fraud or manipulation as a grounds to denial. So we think one will be approved within 3 months. We have 90% odds on that. We're pretty optimistic. But GBTC is an open question. That is not part of the 90% approval odds.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea, Eric, that ultimately Grayscale may win the battle with the SEC, but not necessarily win the war if other spot products can make it to market before they can actually convert. Just going back to that timeline you were suggesting, within the next 3 months. So we're talking January, realistically, if the SEC is going to decide on approval. Yeah, so the good news is, and what everybody should be optimistic about, is the SEC has replied to all the issuers with comments on their applications. Very legal, detailed stuff. ARK and Invesco have already come back with amendments to their applications. The SEC has never engaged with these issuers in the 11 years that this has been going on. This is new, and it shows that they are looking to get the applications up to a point where they're comfortable with them. And we think that'll take a couple months. And January 10th, I believe, is the exact date that they have to have some kind of a decision on ARK. ARK is sort of the guinea pig here, and we think probably at that time they will accelerate the other ones to move up and launch alongside ARK, probably in January, could be sooner.
It could be also a little later, but around all that, I think will play out. There could be some details. Maybe they'll launch a little later in January, but we'll call it a few months from now. It's looking pretty good. Again, based on that optimism that the SEC and the staff is working with the issuers.
All right, a fun ETF IQ Bloomberg Crypto crossover this week. Eric Balchunas, host of ETF IQ, and also joining us from Bloomberg Intelligence. Thank you very much. Now let's head over to the New York City courthouse where Sam Bankman-Fried's trial continues into week 3. Bloomberg's Allison Verspril joins us now from there. So, Allie, give us the latest. What's going down today?
So we began this morning with Sam Bankman-Fried's defense attorney, Mark Cohen, cross-examining Nishad Singh, who is the former, head of engineering at FTX. And basically what he's been trying to do is kind of undercut some of the statements that Nishad made yesterday. So Nishad had said that he often had disagreements with Sam about spending, said that that spending reeked of excess and flashiness. He brought up that this $30 million penthouse that Sam and other FTX and Alameda executives lived in the Bahamas, that was really pushed by Sam, who he said was a fan of views. But the defense attorney brought up the fact that, Nishad himself had mentioned that he at the time was a billionaire, Sam was a billionaire, other executives were millionaires, and he said, was it really that unreasonable, to have 8 of you or about 8 of you all living together in the same penthouse, even though maybe the price on its own would have been a little bit expensive. So we're seeing a lot of that today. We're also seeing some mention of some of the endorsement deals and, the defense attorney trying to get Nishad to say, maybe some of those made sense in terms of boosting the brand. So that's a lot of what's been happening in the courthouse.
And the defense attorney, Allie, has also been trying to get Nishad to sort of play along with him in creating a bit of theater. The judge shot that down. Tell us about that back and forth.
The judge has been kind of shooting down a lot of things, asking for Mark Cohen to build a foundation for some of the arguments that he's making or some of the questions that he's asking. But we saw that they also did that with the prosecution yesterday as well. So we're seeing the judge interjecting. I think also maybe another humorous moment in the courtroom is that the judge has repeatedly sort of interjected when Nishad has been answering questions and saying, essentially you don't have to over-answer. Just answer the question in front of you. Don't try to over-explain or answer questions that haven't even been asked. So that's been kind of the back and forth we've been seeing.
Fascinating stuff. Allie, great to get your insight there. Bloomberg's Allison Verspril is covering the trial for us from the courthouse here in New York. Now, coming up, Israel ordering some crypto accounts to be frozen to cut links between the market and Hamas. That's according to the Financial Times. We'll have more on that with Yaya Fanusie, Crypto Council for Innovation Director of Policy and a former CIA analyst who's followed this space for years.
And speaking of things we're following, let's also take a live look at the floor of the House of Representatives, where voting is currently underway for the new Speaker of the House. Of course, Republicans nominating Jim Jordan, Democrats, their leader Hakeem Jeffries. Already 2 Republican members have voted for Kevin McCarthy rather than Jim Jordan. And Jim Jordan can only afford to lose 4 Republican votes in the face of united Democratic opposition. 217 is the magic number he needs. We will keep you updated on this vote as that alphabetical roll call continues. We'll have more next. This is Bloomberg.
Jordan. Duncan. Jordan. Dunn of Florida. Jordan. Frost.
We are taking a live look at the floor of the House of Representatives, where voting is underway for the next Speaker of the House. Jim Jordan, the chair of the Judiciary Committee, a Republican nominee, of course, can only afford to lose 4 Republican votes to clinch the 217 needed to get the gavel if there is united Democratic support. And already 6 Republican members have voted for someone else. That would suggest that Jordan is unable to clinch the gavel in this first round of voting. We still have to see the rest of the roll call taking place to confirm that, but right now it does not look like Jim Jordan has the vote. So we will
don't
keep
need to see much more, Kailey, do we?
evolving situation.
We only need to see the rest of the roll call to confirm if
Garcia.
Democrats vote for Jim Jordan.
Jordan.
Which is terribly.
Well, they would be voting, Matt, for Hakeem Jeffries. In theory, but of course we have to wait for the final tally to actually make the call. But yes, you're exactly right, Matt. Right now, the numbers would suggest that he does not have the votes. More than 6 Republican members now have not voted for him. So that's what's happening in domestic politics right now, and we will bring you any new news as we know it. But we have to talk about what's happening in geopolitics as well. And it ties to crypto. Israel's government says it has frozen dozens of crypto accounts associated with groups such as Hamas. This is blockchain analytics firms Elliptic and BitOK say wallets linked to Hamas collected almost $135 million between August 2021 and June this year. Let's discuss this now with Yaya Fanusie, former CIA analyst and Crypto Council for Innovation Director of Policy for Cyber Risk. In 2018, he testified before Congress on terrorist use of cryptocurrency. He is here with me in our D.C. studio. So, Yaya, thank you very much for being here. What do we know about how Hamas is or is not using crypto for funding right now as we see this war ongoing?
Well, to clarify, what we know is that obviously the Israeli authorities have said that they've seized a certain amount. The key thing that this points to is that there's actually a digital paper trail. So we're able to see when bad actors have actually used cryptocurrency, there's a way to trace their transactions, right? The blockchain data is traceable. Again, that digital paper trail actually has led to disruptions. It's led to seizures. What we don't know specifically is, well, how much has actually been used. Those numbers that I think that we've seen in reports need some context. What may be happening on the ground is, you have in certain territories, you have over-the-counter brokers that may be serving Hamas and may be serving other customers. If those brokers, for example, have a link to Hamas, their accounts could be seized. It's possible that their accounts could be seized, and those accounts could include not just the crypto that Hamas is using or has used, but other users as well. So the numbers may be just may require a little bit more context. We don't know exactly how much has gone to Hamas. But the key point is that the fact that those transactions occur allows for disruption.
Yaya, how do you feel about this at the Crypto Council for Innovation? I mean, certainly most of the Western world considers Hamas a terrorist organization and doesn't want Hamas to be able to access funds through any means. Of course, for the most part, they use fiat currency, and crypto probably plays a small part in their funding. On the other hand, the idea of cryptocurrency, at least originally, was that it couldn't be censored by any government organization, and that it would be able to, it would be like gravity, and that everyone gets to use it, and no one could stop anyone from doing it. So how do you feel about the idea of censoring this cryptocurrency to certain groups?
Well, I wouldn't use the term censoring. They say that money is fungible. And if you think about crypto, I would say crypto is global. So it's never been the case that you can stop a crypto transaction from happening peer to peer. But we live in a regulated world when it comes to money services and financial services. Actually, since 2013 in the United States, crypto exchanges have been regulated. People say crypto is not regulated. That's a myth. So we always, as a society, we always have measures in place to deal with the potential risks for illicit finance. In crypto, that comes across with anti-money laundering regulations for those crypto traders. I wouldn't say that we're talking about censoring. You're really talking about regulating the businesses that deal with crypto transactions. That's what we do in the world of finance. And when it comes to the United States, that's why we have the regulations. And it's important to note that the weak points are other jurisdictions that may not be following those rules and implementing those rules. Those are where the gaps are, and groups like Hamas or any other bad actor will go to those locations and exploit those platforms in order to get to bypass those safeguards.
All right, so we're hearing more and more about, we were hearing a lot as Russia invaded Ukraine about how that country and Russian oligarchs were moving funds around with crypto, and we're hearing now more and more about how Hamas may be funding certain operations or getting donations via crypto. Do you have any sense of how much of these funds are in crypto versus fiat currencies or versus, for example, the U.S. dollar?
Well, if you're talking about Hamas, right, the universe of their funding is vast in general. Hamas has a mix of sources. You have to think about it, right? They are doing taxation. They have businesses. In fact, U.S. Treasury actually sanctioned the Hamas Investment Office. Yes, that's an actual entity last year for its portfolio, which was $500 million in cash with businesses, real estate, mining, businesses that were across the globe. So we don't know, in terms of crypto, what we've seen. I used to look at some terrorist crowdfunding campaigns several years ago. Typically, those campaigns, which maybe can elicit funds right away, they tend to be short-lived, because if you do public solicitation of crypto, you're raising your profile. You're sort of basically saying, hey, investigator, look at me. This transaction is traceable. Now I've given you a trail to go after me. So I would say crypto, with my experience looking at terrorist financing, is not the major source of a group like Hamas. They have plenty of other sources. Crypto is probably a small part of their overall.
All right, Yaya, it's really valuable to get this insight and context, as you say, as we see this crisis unfolding and consider the role crypto does or does not play in it. Thank you very much for joining us today. That's Yaya Fanusie, Crypto Council for Innovation, Director of Policy for Cyber Risk. We appreciate it. Now, we want to just take another quick check on what's going on the floor of the House of Representatives. Already 9 Republican members have voted for someone other than Jim Jordan to be the Speaker of the House. That would suggest, as we wait for the full roll call vote to be finished, that he cannot clinch the Speaker's gavel on this first round, assuming that Democrats are united in voting for Hakeem Jeffries. Again, Jim Jordan likely not going to be Speaker after this first round of voting. He's going to have at least 9 Republicans to win over if he wants it. We'll keep you updated.
Kane of New Jersey
is Bloomberg.
Jordan. Keating. Jeffries. Kelly of Illinois.
This is Bloomberg Crypto. I'm Matt Miller in New York with Kailey Leinz in Washington. Now, betting on outcomes has been around for centuries. Our next guest, though, operates the first CFTC-regulated exchange that allows people to trade on the outcome of events. Kalshi has developed a new asset class, event contracts, which allow people to trade on a broad range of markets, from inflation and mortgage rates to Fed rates or the likelihood of a government shutdown. Kalshi founder, CTO, Luana Lopes Lara joins us now to talk about this. So great to have you back, and we just wanted to clarify exactly how these contracts work and what all you offer in your marketplace.
That is a great question. Thank you so much for having me back. These events, we created a new asset class called event contracts, and they operate and you can trade them the same way you trade other derivatives, other options, and we are the first CFTC regulated exchange where you can trade on the outcome of these events. So some of the examples of markets you can trade on are the government shutdown, inflation level, Fed interest rates, among a lot of other ones.
So those are all things that I think, market participants that watch these shows, for example, are used to in some way or another betting on, although they wouldn't probably use that verb, right, betting. Mm-hmm. What about elections? What happened with that product, and why can't you, for lack of a better term, bet on elections?
That is a great point. There's no greater risk that Americans face nowadays than election risk. I think if the past 10 years have showed us anything, is how who is in power actually dictates how things are going geopolitically, fiscally, economically, and everyone has a lot of risk associated to this. That's exactly why large corporations, banks, and Wall Street actually uses a lot of very sophisticated financial products to get exposure to the outcome of elections. And our vision was, well, if these people can do it, I think it's a little crazy to think that small businesses and everyday Americans don't face a similar type of risk. And we wanted to bring this activity to an exchange where it's accessible to everyone. You can have fair pricing and all of those things. And we have worked with the CFTC since 2019. We have great respect for them, and we think they're a great regulator. But sometimes the government gets things wrong, and we think that they got this wrong, and we are definitely going to see this through, and we're evaluating our options to be able to allow everyone to have access to a way to hedge any exposure to this.
Exactly. You would think that some investors are going to want to hedge that sort of thing. Leaving that to one side, you have still a range of products that people can use, I'm guessing, to hedge risk for their businesses, right? And does this also smooth out volatility in the rest of the market?
Absolutely, absolutely. We actually have a lot of other markets in the political sphere. For example, our government shutdown market had a lot of activity a couple weeks ago, and it has a lot of activity again for our November 20th shutdown. It's actually saying there's around a 40% chance that even with the speaker still being decided, there's a 40% chance of a shutdown. And you're exactly right. It's about allowing people to hedge risks, allowing people to prepare themselves better for the uncertainties of the future. And this is currently accessible for large corporations in Wall Street. It's just not accessible to everyone. If you have less than $10 million, you have nothing to do to deal with this risk right now.
And finally, Luana, just given this is Bloomberg Crypto, I understand that you don't have contracts in the crypto space at the moment. Do you have plans to in the future?
We always keep our options open. Our goal is to keep expanding the number of contracts and the types of contracts that we offer, but we don't have any clear plans on adding crypto soon. But of course, it's one of the most requested markets from our users, so we are considering it.
All right, well, please come back. Keep us updated if and when that happens. Kalshi founder and CTO Luana Lopes, Lara, we really appreciate you coming back on the show. Now, she was just talking about government shutdown risk and what's going on in the House of Representatives. And right now, at this moment, the House is voting on the next speaker. And Jim Jordan is lacking the votes to win the gavel. Right now, 13 Republicans have voted for someone other than Jim Jordan. That would be enough to sink his attempt at getting the gavel on this round. There's another 4 Republicans, Matt, who have not responded when their name was called in this roll call vote. So we'll have to await the final tally here. But right now, it looks like Jim Jordan is not going to get this done on the first round, Matt.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it looks like the only way he would be able to is if he had a number of Democrats voting for Jim Jordan for Speaker of the House, which seems terribly unlikely. Considering he is, as the founder of the Freedom Caucus, really to the far right of the Republican Party, and not someone you would expect to be involved in a lot of bipartisan legislation. But we will wait till the end of this roll call vote to call it officially, and we'll bring you the tally as soon as we get the final round of the final votes put in here, and try and give you exactly what we think is going to come next.
Mullen.
Yes, of course we will. So stick with Bloomberg Television full coverage of this vote as it continues. And of course, join us next Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern time back here on Bloomberg Crypto. We've got you covered from Washington to New York. Thanks very much for joining us. This is Bloomberg.
Jeffries. Nagoose.